Hello, this is What It Takes to Lead, a podcast about Mike Sterlacey's faith, family, friendships, and business lessons learned over 40 plus years of selling insurance and building a rapid growth insurance agency in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. I'm one of your hosts, Garrett Cooper, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Leif Hurst, producer Charlie Hooper, special guest, CoVerica CEO Rhonda Cox, and CoVerica founder and chairman Mike Sterlacey. Ladies and gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Fantastic.
Great.
Doing well. Glad to be here.
It's all good. I'm in Florida, so it's all good.
We're in the 70s here. It's fantastic.
Yeah, we're covering a broad swath of great temperatures. So in Pittsburgh, obviously, we've got the 30s, 40s. Mike, what are you now in the 80s down there?
No. Actually, it's cool. It's going to be in the high 60s, low 70s. So we're actually cooler than Dallas. But it's sunshine, and I'm looking out at the where the Peace River meets the Gulf. So it's kind of nice.
Okay.
Nice.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask any dolphin sightings today?
Not today. We saw a bunch yesterday, but so far today. But I went around the harbor, where you did the jogging, and so I did about an hour walk this morning. So I didn't see many, but I did see a lot of people out and enjoying themselves. So it's pretty nice. Thanks for asking.
Very cool. Yeah, of course. Like I mentioned, we're joined today by CoVerica CEO Rhonda Cox. And so, Rhonda, just to kind of get started in helping our audience better understand your professional journey. You weren't always the CEO of CoVerica. Can you share with our audience a bit about your professional journey up to this point and leadership opportunities that you were presented with along the way?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation today. So, I'm 29. So if I say I've been in the business for 40 years, would you believe me? But yeah, so my career goes back 40 years and I had a lot of fun the last couple of days just reflecting back on the journey since that time. But out of college, I found my way to the insurance industry. It's not always perceived as the most fun industry, but it is a very noble profession. And so it's one that has allowed me to serve. But probably my first notable opportunity was manually typing claim checks that would go out to insureds for damage to their cars or their roof. Back when we had the typewriter. I feel so old right now. Back when we had the typewriters. And about 3 weeks into that opportunity, they offered me a chance to go to Boston, Massachusetts for 3 weeks to train as an insurance adjuster. Now, I grew up in a small town. We traveled by car on vacations and things. I'd never flown before at the age of 22. And I'm a newlywed. I'm going off for 3 weeks to Boston, Massachusetts. I fly through Atlanta. My mother-in-law was coming back from Washington. So we meet up in the airport. I just remember hanging on to her, not wanting to let her go. So that was probably my first bit with real independence of, okay, you're a big girl now. So I go to the 3-week school. I was by far the youngest one there. Every morning they started class with "Help Me, Rhonda," the Beach Boys song. And
you've never heard that song played for you before, right?
So many times. And then of course they had to have me speak because I was from Louisiana and they're all, mostly from the northern states. And so we had a lot of fun with that. But that truly was an intro to being independent and finding my way, no family around. And so I continued on the insurance carrier side for a few years, and I ended up with an agency in North Louisiana, and I was adjusting auto claims, and it was really getting to be kind of brutal, to be honest with you. And so I thought, okay, what do I want to do? And so I responded to an ad for another insurance agency, and it was more of an administrative type position. And I went to interview, and the lady who has been a mentor for life, really, and a friend, interviewed me, and she said, I'm not going to hire you for this position. There's something different, for you, meant somewhere else. Well, 2 weeks later, she called me back in and she said, I have an opportunity. And it was serving as a claims manager over a team that handled claims for McDonald's restaurants. They had a franchise program. So here I am in my mid-20s at this point, going into a team of established more senior individuals. And so, I had to really, that was probably the first deep dive into, okay, you got to make some decisions here. You're accountable and leading that team. And then from there, I was with them for well over a decade and started moving more to the operations side. So since then, my opportunities have been more operational type leadership. I found my way to CoVerica for that reason in November of 2011 and have served here alongside Mike and others since that time. And in April of 22, Mike invited me to step into the President CEO role. And I continue to learn and continue on this journey of leadership. So
very cool. So it's quite the story you have there, from small town Louisiana to what brought you to Dallas.
My husband was in the film industry, and so he was looking to expand his opportunities. And actually, the agency I worked for had a branch in Dallas. Okay. And so I transferred to Dallas more on the client service side as a supervisor. And the next year, I was promoted into the branch manager for that location here in Dallas. And then a few years later, we sold that agency to another family-owned agency. So most of my career has been spent with 3 family-owned insurance agencies.
Very nice. Cool. Very cool. Rhonda, I mean, you clearly work closely together as a visionary and an integrator at CoVerica. And that might be something we need to dig into a little bit because our listeners may not understand that vernacular of an integrator. But you talk a lot about the challenges of leadership. And one of the phrases that I've heard you mention just around the office is kind of this crucible of leadership. Why does the idea carry so much meaning to you, and how does it apply here at CoVerica?
Well, this is something that actually, and I think I mentioned I'm learning a lot through Mike and his experience, and he introduced the concept to me several months or years ago. It's interesting because when I take that, it's to me it's you go through change and it can change you, can help you grow or can set you back, and you have to decide how you're going to evolve on the other side of it. And we've had some events that have taken place here the last few days, and it's an opportunity for me to share with others, the whole concept of, okay, this is where we were, this is where we've come to, and where are we going? What have we learned from it? And how can we grow from it and be stronger from it?
Yeah, perfect.
Can we talk a little bit about what the differences between the visionary and the integrator is? I think that might be a good topic to discuss for listeners.
Yeah, that I think that'd be a good jumping off point. And because you guys really, Mike and Rhonda, I mean, y'all really are essentially tied to the hip of as far as leading CoVerica goes. And Mike, I mean, you selected Rhonda to kind of carry forth the vision that you had outset. But I mean, kind of talk to me about where does the visionary kind of role, where does that kind of begin and end, and then to think of something and to leave it with someone else to execute. Y'all talk to me about that relationship just for a second, if you don't mind.
Gino Wickman wrote a book. It's called Attraction, which we used the EOS, and how to run a company. And the basic premise of the book, and we actually hired a coach and went through the whole. Gosh, we've had it now, I don't know how many years. But it was originally written with the concept, Gino wrote the book saying that, these people that take the risk of running and building a business get so tied up in running and expanding the business that they forgot why they set it up. And they set it up so that they would have financial security and they would be able to live out their dreams and their God-given talents. Very often people that are working for large companies get laid off at some point, and or they never make it to retirement, and then they've got to do something to pay the bills. Anyway, so he took over his family business and then put it together and then sold it, and then he came up with the concept of teaching others how to run a business and grow a business and have kind of a blueprint of the different positions that need to be taken care of. So you have the visionary, which is the person that can see where they want to go, what their North Star is, and what they want to accomplish with their business. but they have to have an integrator, and the integrator is the person that does the tactical work. So I heard a story that George Bush Sr. On the Iraq War he hired he brought in one of the generals that was a really, really bright strategist, and something along the lines of, okay, we want to get in and get out fast. How do we do it? How do we get in and get out fast? And so the general that was a strategist said, hit these 5 areas at the same time and you'll cripple them. And so then he excused that general, and then he brought in another general that was known for being very much a tactical general. And so he was the how-to, what you're going to need to be able to end the war, and it worked. It was in and out pretty quickly. A lot of generals will say the problems that we're having with these ongoing wars is we don't have a clear goal in mind to get in and get out. Okay, so with the transition of we had John was the integrator with me as the visionary, and it became apparent that to make the transition that I felt the company needed into the future, which would be a future without Rhonda, without me, without John, without Andy, and some of the other players, we had to change the way we were doing business. Now, as a visionary, what that really means is you're very risk tolerant, and you'll try different things which haven't yet been proven. Whereas the integrator is much more conscious of the methodology that needs to be used. So you have the Six Sigma, which is like Toyota, which is how do you really maximize on profitability and lean down your company that's all you do. Well, it works very brilliantly. Who can say that they don't know what they're doing? But it doesn't allow for a visionary to come in and experiment. So it's the combination of those two that becomes somewhat complicated. Given where CoVerica is in its journey, it became apparent to me with Center Consulting that we needed, Rhonda even said it a few days ago, as a place marker, or an interim. Like a lot of churches, when the senior pastor leaves, there is this tremendous effect on the congregation, and so they have somebody who is an interim pastor until they find the replacement. So that's kind of where we are. Well, that is where we are. We're looking for my ultimate replacement for me and Rhonda. So, and I needed to deploy John elsewhere so that he could help with all the contractual work that we're doing for the ownership shift to the producers and staff. And so, without getting too granular, the challenge is that with Crucible of Leadership, I think, and this is Garrett and I talked about this, it's something that I really wanted to kind of drill down and have this conversation with, because some of the things that I think about is, okay, how much do I share about the hardships of leadership? You know, we have, over the last 32 years, has been multiple lawsuits where we're both the plaintiff and the defendant. There has been issues with the IRS where they want different data and proof of things. And when the IRS wants something, you've got to drop everything else and get them what they want. Well, meanwhile, all the other work doesn't stop. You still have to take care of that. And you still need to do it with a smile on your face, because the staff doesn't understand what's going on, and they're very reactive around the water cooler. And when somebody leaves a company or is terminated from the company, they usually don't understand the why. And so then you have the restriction on how much you can share with the staff. But it's all by design, ultimately, and things work out. So how much do you share on the hardships of, or the Crucible of Leadership? Now, at its core, Crucible of Leadership it's that iron pot that's hanging in a fireplace that has soup boiling in it. And everybody gets to enjoy the soup, but the leadership is the pot that's dealing with all the flames so that the soup can be delivered. Then you also talk about things that may happen that may not happen. A real challenge that I mentioned on our last podcast is that my experience over the last 32 years, in some ways, are irrelevant for the next 32 years because things are changing. So it's more of the approach and the attitude that has to be passed on, not the, well, what would you do if this happened, or what would you do if that happened?
Right. It's more of a, here's how to think, instead of this is what we did when this happened. Reading the field versus knowing the play.
Right. And having the courage. I saw Heidi shared it with me, a quote by Churchill that I just absolutely love. If you're going through hell, go through it. That's all you can do.
Well, that's been one of my mottos and things that I reflect back on. If I'm going through a challenge, just keep walking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Keep walking the next day and the next day. And so, when you're going through one of the challenges and opportunities, it will pass, right? We will find a solution to it. It may not be always the right one or the easiest one, but you keep moving through it. So.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about this idea in a lot of the all hands. I think it speaks a lot to the people.
It's interesting whenever you talk about kind of this cauldron of soup. In some way, I mean, Mike, you're the fire. You're the reason why the soup is being made. Rhonda, you might be the vessel, you might be the pot, or you might be the ingredients.
Sometimes it gets really hot. I'll say that.
And so, I mean, where do you see your role as the integrator to kind of execute the plan?
Yeah, it's an interesting time in the history of CoVerica. And when Mike and Paul Kiesling of Center Consulting invited me into a meeting, and it was like a week before the meeting. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And when they offered the idea of the leadership role, I said, why me?
Mm-hmm.
And Mike's response at the time was, we need stability. We're embarking on a time where the staff is going to be put through some challenges. We're going to be put through some challenges, and we need to find a way that we can guide them through these changes to get to the other side, which is, CoVerica forever,
right.
Or CoVerica with the employees as ownership. And so it wasn't coming into a seat that was pretty established and we just wanted to maintain. It definitely was coming into a seat where I knew that I respected and loved Mike and Heidi and the culture and the organization that they built. And I had to take some time to think about it because, it's no secret, Mike and I are kind of total opposites, right? And, I challenge him and he challenges me, and we kind of find the middle ground. But in the end, it's what's best for CoVerica, what's best for everyone. So.
Right.
Well, one thing, if I can throw in that would become more apparent if we had like a lot longer conversation, but knowing this change was going to be a real watershed moment for the company, the difference between the producers, the salespeople, and the service staff is what? The service staff are your true nurturers to the client relationship. They take care of everybody. They make certain that the customers are taken care of. They're the caring people, and they're the most conservative. They're not used to dealing with adversity. Whereas as a producer, they have to go out and fight every day to get somebody to let them quote their insurance and write their insurance. And they have to deal with the problems of incredible rate increases we're experiencing right now, or non-renewals from companies that are either pulling out or they don't want to write that business anymore. So they're used to dealing with hardships and changes. Whereas the service staff, the administrative staff, they want stability. They want to be able to know what's going to happen next as much as they can. Well, clearly, John and I, and let's throw in Andy because he's a rainmaker, we're not going to really give everybody that sense of good, stability and calm and et cetera. Whereas that is Rhonda. And also Rhonda is very, very strong. She's got a very strong faith. She's been to hell and back like most of us. I'm not going to share her age. But you can't get to that point in life and not have experienced so much, and you've either figured out how to deal with it or it destroys you. So it was, Paul asked me, okay, it's clear that we need to make a big change, and we can't go from you, Mike, to the next person that's going to ultimately run CoVerica. It's just, you've got too much to do. I mean, we had to spin off the alliance for son Chris to buy me out 51%, that's a whole nother conversation. Maybe that's another podcast of how he had to come to a point where he decided to buy it, because I said, I'm going to sell it either to CoVerica or I'm going to sell it back to SIAA. And so it was only under those circumstances that he said, well, then I'll buy the majority. So he's had the Crucible of leadership experience, and it's changed him. And you guys have seen it. You've seen the change in him.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think the biggest thing that I wanted to get a plug in before we go to some of the other questions is this sense of autonomy versus responsibility. Most people say, gee, if I owned my own company, or if I really was in control of my life, I'd be able to do what I want, when I want, how I want. I'd have all this autonomy. And that is not, it's a lie. The more that you want, the more money you want to make, the more things that you want to be able to do in life, you've got to add on more responsibility. And that is the crucible of leadership. It fascinates me that people love sports and they see these teams, they see the gold medalists, they see those people had to work their ass off to get to that point. It didn't just come. And so that is a good way of explaining the crucible of leadership and what it means. So, and I would just want to throw that in.
Well, yeah, and I want to stick with talking about some of those experiences. So, in preparation for today's show, I was reading some articles about the Crucible of leadership, and those articles talked about these transformative experiences that leaders go through that sort of produces this a unique leadership identity, right? Like Mike, I know you just got done reading the book about Eisenhower. Right. I mean, obviously, his formative experiences in the Army, overseeing, D-Day and so forth, right, helped prepare him for the presidency. Rhonda and Mike, can you speak to some of the transformative experiences that you've undergone sitting in the leadership seat, and really how it's kind of shaped your style, right? How you approach running the company.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I recognize, I have to be self-aware, right? And I recognize myself as a nurturer. So I have to, when I go into a situation, be very mindful of, am I trying to nurture this person, or am I trying to help them grow and learn? Probably the most transformative experience I had in my career early on was having that first employee termination.
Right.
3 days before Christmas, because it couldn't wait because of the circumstances. And when you sit back and realize that it's not just your life, it's not just the company's, but it's that individual's and that their families, right? And it puts a different perspective and a weight on the accountability of being a leader. It's not just about maybe just this one thing, but it goes beyond that.
Mike, I mean, I've seen in your career, just as someone that has been marching with you, disappointment, betrayal, things that just seem like they were going to go one way, and you seem to take it with just such a, well, this is what we're going to be doing now.
I don't want to sound too self-grandizing. So let me just kind of give, when my parents moved from the Italian clique that we had up in Columbus, Ohio. I know Charlie was talking about Columbus, Ohio earlier, but we had family and we moved to Dallas. We knew no one. And then my parents got divorced and my dad was gone. And I love my father, but he wasn't there. So, I mean, it was tough. I used to get beat up and had no day. Back in those days in the 50s and 60s, divorce wasn't heard of. So I learned young to make people laugh. They don't want to hit you if they're laughing. Okay. So I had been in so many situations where it was survival. My mother was very negative, not very nurturing. My sisters, they had lost their dad too, and they were going into teenage years. And so we were kind of on our own when we were in Richardson, Texas. So I mention that on a personal level to say that overcoming adversity, I had no choice. So what it developed in me was that when I would come up on hardships, it wasn't like I just don't want to deal with that. I mean, I had no choice, so I had to deal with it. So fast forward all the way to in insurance. In insurance, what you're looking for when you're selling insurance, when you first I started with personal lines and I got into commercial lines, but you're overcoming objections. Most people buy insurance because they have to. They don't really understand it. One of the earlier podcasts you mentioned, Leaf, you really didn't think that much of it until you had a 6-figure loss in your house. Then all of a sudden you understand the importance of insurance. But anyway, so you're dealing with people that are not wanting to buy insurance from you. And then you go through the experiences when you're helping people with their insurance. You save them money, you take care of them, and then they leave you for not very much money. There's no, you sense this, there's no loyalty and then you go through that. And so you have to keep refocusing on why you're doing what you're doing. Then when I left Century to become an independent agent and work in an independent agency, they were running things in a way that I knew wouldn't work. So it irritated me. I'd get mad at it and say, wait a minute, this is not going to work. So I pushed through it. Now, to your question, I won't mention the person's name, but how many people do you know that have been invited to leave a funeral? That's me.
Yeah. I think, you told the story. Yeah. You told the story on one of the earlier episodes.
Yeah. And so to survive, if you understand the crucible of leadership, and hopefully we're describing it, you get to a point that you go back to I talk about the why, how, and what. Why are these things happening? In this case about the funeral, it's because the specific person involved wanted to put in for unemployment. And I said, I don't think that it was designed for this situation. And I, like Winston Churchill says, if you have enemies, good, it means you stood for something. Mm-hmm. The hardships that come in leadership, or when you're in that position of having to make the decisions, we have a mutual friend that was working in the agency that decided to start their own agency, and they weren't going about it the right way. And so, Leaf, you stood up and said, you need to go talk to Mike about this to avoid any real conflict. And he did, and it worked out. Mm-hmm. So I guess the encouraging thing, and I want to make certain that I don't come across as just, it's all hard, because yes, it is hard, but there is a sense of satisfaction when things work out the way they're supposed to work. You will have those situations where somebody doesn't like you because you made a painful decision that affected them, and it is collateral damage. However, if you're following the precepts for everybody's best interest sustainably, then you'll come up to what happens. Now, another funny thing too is I've had people come back some years later and they're thankful that those painful decisions were made. We want as we have the 3 ways of dealing with employees. 1, help them find contentment. Well, the way you help an employee find contentment is questioning, why do you work and why do you think that you need to make 10% more every year? I mean, what is it? What is the goal? What number do you have to have in your bank account or your financial portfolio before you're going to relax a little bit? And I will tell you, I have friends in their 70s and 80s that still haven't asked that question, and they're still in the rat race. Here's the point. If you can think about a number that you can say, I can be comfortable at this level, okay? And if you get to that number, here's the miracle. You then can think about, okay, self-actualization. Am I living my life between now and dead, as Dr. Laura Schlesinger says? Am I living the way I want to live? Well, if you established in your mind an amount of money and investments that you needed to feel secure, and you've crossed that level, you have no one to blame for your lack of happiness other than yourself, because now you're free. Whereas if you don't do that, you're just going to keep running and running and running until your health gives out. So I think that the challenges that I've had over the years, I can look back now and say they really taught me a lot. And it's not that you're not going to make any more mistakes, because that's fantasy land. But you get to the point where you realize, you know what? It was worth it. I'm further ahead, and now I can be more encouraging to others. So one of the big things I want to say is I've had people in my life who knew that I was working hard and they knew that I'd be getting beat up or whatever if something happened. But they said, you'll get through this, Mike. That's why it's so important to read people like Eisenhower or Churchill or Jesus Christ. I mean, these are people that have been there, done that, and you can learn from them.
Yeah, I think from my perspective too, Mike mentioned his earlier years, just going through personal adversities, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's family, whether it's friends, coworkers, and from an early age, my mom always told people that I raised her. And so I think I just kind of developed that sense of I've got to be strong. I need to take care of matters. And, having gone through some pretty serious medical challenges with family members and figuring out how I could stand beside them, but be the strong one that they needed at the time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the same in business, right? We're all human, but at a leadership level, you have to be that strength. You have to be that port in the storm that guides people through that, and the resilience to be able to do that when you're not feeling it, when you were, awake all night trying to figure out the right solution to something, but you rise and shine, right? And just how do you mentor younger leaders or people who desire to be leaders? We have Samantha is working in our HR department and is working towards HR director. But we talk a lot about, a lot of experience comes from having yourself in that seat for a while. We can tell you all these things and we can show you all these things, but there's certain things you just have to experience. And that goes along with building your character and your strength and your resolve for what is yet to come. And that's just one example. We have, numerous people that are in leadership training opportunities, and just help how can I best help guide them as president of the agency in the culture that we have at CoVerica.
And that's the thing is, I think you've got I started working here when I was 23, and it's like, you've got to be subjected to difficult situations in order to, even think of like how they forge metal. Like, they subject it to extreme temperature, they hit it with hammers, they bring it down to cold temperatures very rapidly. Like, strong things are not made in vacuums, with no adversity. There's no book or film about a great leader where, nothing happened to them. We don't know those people's names. We know the terrible stories of the adversity that faced Eisenhower and that faced, Churchill. But there's not, it's like, there's no one interesting that's a leader that had just like some amazing childhood and just was on easy mode their whole life. And so, Charlie, you're kind of where I was. And I know you had something we were talking about with being kind of a young leader that you wanted to ask.
Yeah. I feel like with Garrett moving to Ansel, and even Leaf, you'd be going there too. It's not just Mike and Rhonda's that are going to be leaving and given the space for future leaders. It's also like people directly above me, they're going too. So I feel like soon I'm going to be having to step into shoes that I didn't originally think I was going to be stepping into so soon. So I feel like what I kind of want to hear from both the visionary side and the integrator side is what are some things besides just the direct experience of being in those crucibles, what are some things that you could give to future leaders to prepare for those opportunities and crucibles?
Charlie, there's in wartime they call them battlefield promotions. So you can be if the lieutenant and the sergeant is killed and you're a private, you're now in charge. So I think that too much emphasis is placed on preparing for something that may not happen. This is why the CoVerica ethos was created. We created it to lay out, the 4 precepts, ask why things are happening, how do you deal with them, and then what actions do you take? And then the 3 ways that you deal with the employees in general. Okay, so let's go to the why. So when you are in a position you have the opportunity to assume authority, to assume leadership, you've got to ask yourself, am I willing to do this? And just be very sober about it. I would suggest that people talk to their spouses if they're married, or their friends of virtue if they have them, or somebody that they're close to, saying, I have this opportunity and I'm contemplating stepping into it. So like in your case, how involved do you want to commit? I think that unfortunately, our youth, you being the youths, like
That's me, yeah.
cousin Vinny, youths, have been not genuinely informed of what life really is like. And I had this conversation with Samantha. I'll throw her under the bus. Really thinking, what can I be passionate about? And I'm thinking, it doesn't matter what you do. I mean, I played in bands, photography, radio, TV, film was my major in college, and I'm chasing this creativity and all this other stuff. And here's what it all comes down to, boys and girls: you're going to deal with people, and there's a lot of people that are real stinkers. And so how do you deal with people that are stinkers, whether they're creative or whatever it is you're doing? And we have so many opportunities today that didn't exist 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And then you have the internet that you can ask all these questions that you probably don't even really know how deep the questions should be. So you get a superficial answer and then you run with it because you got an answer. So I would suggest to you, as a potential future leader, saying, first and foremost, do I really want to take on more responsibility because I want more autonomy? How do you get autonomy? You get autonomy by being successful. When you're successful in something that you're doing, you will feel the sense of accomplishment, and that's called autonomy. You know you can do the job. I don't have anything to prove to anybody anymore. So once you get to that point, that's true autonomy, but it came through responsibility. It's not running away from things. It's not avoiding work. So when hardships come, because who knows what they'll be, Charlie? I mean, you're going to face things that I've never even considered, because my history started in 1954 and it's where we are today in 2024. So if you decide you want, and I strongly encourage it because it's worth it, it's just like anything, to win a gold medal Olympic, to win a Super Bowl, to anything that sense of accomplishment when you nail it, and that pride that you have, and nobody can take that away from you. It's like getting a college degree. When I married Heidi, she hadn't finished school yet. As a matter of fact, when I first met Heidi, I was being very disrespectful, which you guys have come to appreciate in me, which I think is kind of funny. But I said to her, so where did you go to college? What degree did you get? And she said, I didn't go to college. I said, oh, so you worked on your MRS degree. Anyway, bada bing, bada boom. So I said, why didn't you go to college? And she says, well, my family didn't think it was that important for a girl to go to college. And I blah, 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 blah. And so I said, well, that's something nobody can take away from you. That sense of accomplishment. And for the rest of your life, you will know that you graduated from college. And so it took 6 years to do it. And God bless her, she did it when she was helping me raise Mike and Chris, going to school. And she didn't just graduate, she graduated cum laude. And it was very important for her. But that gave her a sense of accomplishment that no one can take away. So the joy of leadership is that when you go through the crucible side of it, and you stay focused on accomplishing it and getting it done to where you've done well with it, that's everything. Because for the rest of your life, you did something and you didn't run, you didn't give up. So you go to the why and ask yourself, why are these things happen? When I do that, which I always do that, after I get mad and whatever I do, but then I get to okay, why is this really happening? And then it helps me to see the other person's perspective. That's why it's so important. I was talking to Garrett about the die to self. He thought I was saying that just means park the ego at the door. And I said, no, that's not all of it. A big chunk of it is go back to the facts, just the facts. There used to be an old show, black and white, called Dragnet. And Sergeant Friday would say, okay, ma'am, nothing but the facts. Once you have the true facts, then you can start to come up with, okay, so maybe this is happening because of that. So you're understanding why it's happening. Then you decide, now that I think I have an idea of why it's happening, how am I going to deal with it? And then you get to what actions you take. So when we were talking about the succession planning for CoVerica, which I've been working on for 20 some odd years, thinking I don't ever want to sell CoVerica because I've seen what happens when agencies sell to other agencies. Everything changes. It gets stripped down. It's never the same. And nowadays you get to worry about whatever pronoun you want to use. It's gotten to the point to where I can't believe what is important to the people that are running companies out of the human resource department. So if you want to have a real positive effect on people's lives, you want to be able to maintain the ethos that I think that CoVerica has. So how do we pass that on to the next generation? Well, part of it is to say there's going to be hardships, but while Rhonda's still here, while I'm still here, while John and Andy's still here, while Gary's still here, lean on us when you run into these things. So you don't have to be alone. You don't have to be afraid. So when things happen, you go through here's why I think it happened, and then reach out to other people and that's what's so great about CoVerica. There's so many people that have been in the business for years and years. Why do you think this happened? And then they can give you their understanding, their explanation, and it's not so scary. And then you decide, how do you want to deal with it? And then what actions that you take. So hopefully that gives you some understanding. But I would say if you have any inclination of wanting to take on a leadership role, take it. It is absolutely worth it.
I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, I would add to that, just embrace it, really. Because if you have that thought, then there's a spark there, right? And the beauty of what I think we're going through right now, there's a lot of it, but with the transference of ownership is identifying that talent, maybe raw, right? But it starts with that spark of, okay, this interests me. I think I can grow from this. I think I can help make a difference here. And you don't have to have a leadership title, really, to make an impact inside an organization. We all have coworkers. We all have people that we bounce things off of, and we're with people here more than we're at home with waking hours, right, with our families. And so why not just practice that exercise, work that muscle of taking that step forward, doing that extra step, whatever you think the minimum is to get something done, go that extra step, have that extra conversation, and just make yourself visible within the organization.
Right.
I just want to add something to your point, Rhonda. I mean, one of the things that I know has been helpful for you, but I've also heard Mike talk about it. And Charlie, I just want to kind of put this, seed this in your mind is, seeking outside learning opportunities. So C12, Rhonda, you're in C12 right now. Mike previously did C12 or a mastermind equivalent. I think looking for opportunities to grow with other leaders, like in a peer environment, is great. And then also like professional associations, just there are a ton of leadership training opportunities. They're just not, some of them are within the walls of CoVerica, but as we know, there's a ton of them, especially you guys down in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. I mean, there's a ton of organizations, whether it's nonprofits, professional associations, that are looking for volunteers, that are looking for people to step up and help. So that can be great training grounds too.
Mm-hmm. I think you're making an excellent point. It's asking for help. Asking for help is a sign of strength. It's not a sign of weakness. If you're asking people for help, when you're talking to people, they will say, wow, they really care enough to ask for help. So much of what people think is, well, I don't want anybody to think I'm weak, or I don't want people to think I don't know what I'm talking about. What I encourage older people to do is to make certain that they're encouraging younger people to take risk, to be comfortable with it, that you're not alone. The concept I heard from Glenn Campbell years ago was King Arthur will eventually wear out. So King Arthur has to eventually become Merlin for the process to continue. So I'm very happy at my 69 years old to realize that now I'm in a position, because I did come up with a number that I needed to have to live the rest of my life comfortably. I'm at a point where I don't have to sell CoVerica to a third party to make money to get out of the company. So the joy of being able to perpetuate internally to give everybody that opportunity, there's nothing that would make me happier than to have new leadership taking risk, taking chance, and saying, hey, I want to bounce this off of Rhonda or John or Andy, or there's always Mike I can talk to, and jump into it. Garrett and Leaf, I don't think that you would be comfortable in starting Ansel if we weren't all working together. It's the formation of all of us going toward a common goal that makes it exciting and fun and scary at the same time.
Yeah.
And I would say too that there are many people out there with experience that want to give back, right? And finding those individuals that you can connect with, that you feel comfortable talking to. But even in our own organization, we have, a good percentage of our staff have lived these years, these experiences, and want to share that with you. They may not proactively approach you with it. I'm looking at you, Charlie, but I'm talking to others who would have the same interest. And just, it warms their heart too, right? Because they want to be able to share their experiences. So I would, again, just say embrace it, look for it, and don't shy away from it.
Yeah. And to just kind of piggyback on what Garrett said is know that, some of the best leadership opportunities I've had were not here at CoVerica. Some of the greatest things I learned actually was from coaching Little League baseball.
Right.
And it was just, it's like, the greatest the spoils of victor and the greatest defeats, and to know that you did everything at the right time and the right moment. It just came down to one last play, and just to be able to see kids step up and do the right thing. And all this came out of, and also, politics of the league and cheating refs and parents that are chaotic. And all these things. And, and it was something that, I talk about baseball stuff all the time with you guys. It's just, I remember one of the greatest things that I was talking with the kids about is, hey, it's okay to make a mistake as long as you're learning from it. The thing that would mess up is somebody throws a ball at somebody and kid doesn't catch it. And then the kid that was supposed to catch it looks at the other kid and is all shoulders, and it's just like, no, just pat yourself on the chest and just say, hey, that was on me. I'm going to do better next time. And let's just go on with the next play. And it's like, had it not been for coaching baseball, like wouldn't have learned that as maybe as quickly as what we did. And so, yeah. And now I'm a couple of years removed from it. And it's, it's like, I'm looking for that next opportunity. I'm looking for that next leadership thing. So,
yeah, well, I see you definitely bring that idea into the workspace. Like, I feel like when we're developing Salesforce things, like we have no problem admitting to mistakes. I'll just be like, oh, screwed that one up. And then we just go fix it.
Yeah. And you fix it. And the thing is, you've learned from stuff I've made mistakes on, and I've learned from things that you've made mistakes on. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's,
Y'all remember what Thomas Edison said? It took him 1,000 times to get the light bulb, and people said, how did you deal with it? He says, well, every mistake I made, I realized that would be one less mistake I'd have to make to get to the light bulb.
I found out 999 ways not to make a light bulb. And so
that's right.
That's the importance of reading, is because that is a way for you to learn from other people's mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
That is the trials and tribulations of an Eisenhower. It's just kind of like, because even after you read things like that, you can even kind of see it crop up in your own life and just be like, gosh, this is that disappointment, that I was reading about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I want to build on that. So, my question, I guess it's a bit personal, but I think it'll be helpful for other leaders to hear as well. One of the things I've found challenging in sitting in the leadership seat a few times over the years has been, pushing through really stressful situations, right? Situations where, you have a fellow owner that, or owners that are essentially tearing the company apart. You have difficult customers, even potentially maybe threatening a lawsuit, or you have a situation where a funder, right, commits, but then there seems to be some other strings attached at the very end. And so, can you both talk about some of the approaches that you've used, in your career, especially sitting in the leadership seat, to push through these really difficult, stressful situations? Practices that you use. Mike, I know you often talk about your faith, but just what are some of the strategies that you use to push through these really stressful situations that ultimately any leader is going to face?
Garrett, you just mentioned that regarding Mike, but when I was looking, through the questions, the faith is what comes to mind, and that's for me personally, right? And just praying for that guidance and that wisdom, discernment of, okay, what's happening? Why is it happening? What can I learn? But how can we work through this? And then the second one would be just to stop and listen for a moment to what's going on, instead of reacting immediately. Just for me, it's to absorb it and process. And I'm a processor, but to process the magnitude of it. Sometimes it seems worse at 3:00 in the morning than it does at 8:30 in the morning. So just giving myself some space to figure out what are my options. And grace, there's a lot of grace in there, right? When you start talking about conflict or challenges, especially with people, or are we extending each other grace to really try to understand what's going on?
Oh, that's great.
I think I will go back to the CoVerica ethos, where it talks about, the precepts and the why, how, and what. And I've mentioned this before, but let me give a more, as you said, a personal application. So we set up a captive insurance company, and Congress said that this is legal. So we have set up a captive insurance company, which has paid already more than several $1 million in claims. The IRS is attacking captives because a lot of captives are not run properly. And so I go to why is this happening to me? Okay. And then I realize, well, that's silly. It's not happening to me. It is a situation where there are cases where people have set up captives and have laundered money essentially to the extreme. And so the current administration decided to go after the captives and make certain that they were run properly. Now, here is why the why is so important. Those people in the IRS that are asking for all this information from us, number one, don't understand insurance. They don't understand captives. So part of me gets all upset saying, well, you idiots, and blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is put yourself in their shoes where they don't understand insurance. They don't understand captives. And so we have to explain it to them. Now, to be fair, this is after 32 years of ownership of running a company that now is a pretty big, it's a huge small agency or a small huge agency, depending on how you want to look at it. So it's not like I started with this. I started with much smaller challenges. And the challenges that you have when you first go into a responsible or leadership position, they're preparing you for the next one. So every time something happens, I say, what am I supposed to learn from this? And Rhonda said faith. I don't want to be a proselytizing broken record here, but I don't know how people can get up every day if they don't believe in Jesus Christ or have a savior. I don't know, because life is just too hard. But putting that to deal with the secular side of it, if you think in terms of the why is this happening, and then it becomes apparent. So like I said, with the IRS, we have to educate the IRS. Well, to educate the IRS, I have to have legal counsel. Well, then I have to make sure that they understand what we're doing. So it's very expensive. It takes a lot of time. But if you have a North Star, if you're doing the right thing for the right reasons, eventually it always pans out. It's going to be grueling. It's going to take a long time. But if you have lived your life properly, like let's go for some examples. If you are over leveraging your business and you have all this debt, it's great until something happens. So when, like in California, when real estate was just going crazy and people were just buying and buying and buying because everything was going crazy and doubling in value, well, that's all great till the music stops. And when it leveled out, a lot of people lost their life savings because they over leveraged. So you need to be thinking in terms of, okay, how do I take risk, but how much risk can I take? And do I have the ability to sustain the worst case scenario? And if the answer is I can't do it, then don't do it. If you can, then you do. So me setting up a captive, one of the things that happened with the captive is I said, let's go ahead and pay the taxes, interest, and penalty while we go ahead and sue the IRS to get resolution to this. And I asked the attorney, why don't more people do it that way? And he says, because they can't afford it. Well, that gets back to my premise. If you can't afford something, if you can't afford the house you're buying, if you can't afford the cars you're buying, if you can't afford the lifestyle you're living, go to Dave Ramsey and listen to his speeches. Get out of debt. So as you're growing your personal family income and all that stuff, make certain that you can live the life that you want to live. So I always go to the why. Why is this happening when we have an employee that leaves the company and does something that they shouldn't do? Why are they doing it? Very often, it's because they're lying to themselves, or they're thinking that somehow it's going to be the grass is greener somewhere else, or there's usually some reasons or some distortment there. But when you really get down to it, they never felt comfortable enough of coming to me or to somebody else and saying, look, I have this desire, or I have this fear, or I have this concern, and they're not voicing it. So when you look at it from that perspective, you'll be a little bit more compassionate, a little bit more. Let me help you understand that this really is something that we can work through. Now, that's why we came up with the concept of help people find contentment in their work that they're doing. But if they want to make more money, if they want to have more leadership responsibility, the finesse there is saying you're going to have to take on more responsibility for that. It's just not going to come because of you've been here 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. You have to be able to demonstrate your ability to do you have the capacity, desire, and commitment? Do you have that? And let us help you to that. Now, ultimately, if we can't make it work, let's help you build a resume to go somewhere else where you can live out your God-given talents. That's so different than the 3-strike rule. Yeah. So hopefully that answers the question when you're coming up against something that's really where did this come from? Okay. So here's some things that I say to people too. Okay. We all know we're going to die, right? 100%. Nobody gets out of this alive. If you know that you're going to die, the question then becomes, how are you going to die? Now, I would say it's a spiritual journey if you want to figure out why you have to die, but let's just go to the how. How are you going to deal with that? Do you live your life to where you don't want to go outside? People that wear the masks, I still see people wearing the mask. They're so scared to death they're going to get COVID. And all. Listen, we all have a birth date and a death date. We don't know what it is. We didn't know what our birth date was either. So how do you choose to deal with these things is a big difference. And then what actions do you take? But what happens is when something hits you, now, obviously, you don't have this luxury if you just had a car accident. I'm not talking about things that need immediate medical attention. I'm talking about issues like a lawsuit, issues like an employee that needs to be helped transition somewhere else, or a potential employee in our company that really could do more. Can we help encourage them to take that chance?
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, and some of these things, I mean, for instance, these forging events that happen that make stronger companies, stronger leaders, stronger resolve of people. I mean, as an example, you're not really tested until you've been financially tested, or until you've been, so you've got to live within your means to know that, hey, there's going to come a time to where it's not, maybe the government does shut the whole economy down for a year. How many businesses do we know that didn't survive that? But because, we lived a lean life, or that we saved some of the spoils for later, we did survive that. And so it's just one of those things you've got to think about, to where what made me think of this was when you were talking about being so over leveraged, that when those trying times do come, you can still survive and come out the other end of it.
And that's another very important reason to have close friends of virtue, so that you can kind of talk out loud. I mean, one tremendous thing that I have with Heidi, and she admitted this when we went to Paul Kiesling at the Center Consulting, when we went to Pennsylvania to talk. She says, I don't know what Mike's talking about half the time, but I know that if I listen and I'm concerned, he will eventually figure it out for himself. So that's the importance of friendships of virtue, and having people that you can talk to, so that you can understand, here's what I'm thinking about doing. So in the discussions with, and listen, this transition from CoVerica, where it is to where it's going, I'm very mindful of how difficult it is and challenging it is for Rhonda, John, and Andy. I mean, these are people that we've been working very closely together for over a decade now. And so we're looking at bringing in people to turn the company over the next so many years. That's scary.
Yeah, and I would say the weight of that too, of building that legacy to continue to honor what Mike and Heidi have built, right? But yet understanding that times change, circumstances change, and how do we blend that and move that forward? And I honestly believe the ethos that Mike and Heidi created and gifted to us as an organization is exactly what will be that tool that helps. And so I've spent the last few weeks visiting individually with each of the team leads. Number one, make sure they have it. Number two, make sure that they have spent some time reading it and studying it. But really, most importantly, is it something they can get behind and support and use as their North Star, right? When you're having a conversation or making a decision, it gives us all the same
hymnal, same hymnal
to sing from, right? Or, because if one employee is trying to have a difficult conversation, but another employee is trying to make a decision on the next move, if they're all going to the same guiding light, it should give us something in common to help. And I get a little passionate here because I have seen the blood, sweat, and tears that Mike and Heidi have put into this, and the accountability of all of us to be able to carry it forward as it's meant to be carried forward. I know that they personally believe that, this is God's vision, not theirs. They're vessels for that. And so just being able to help carry that along as leaders in the organization, no matter what titles or jobs that we hold, it's all of our accountabilities.
We're really pushing for encouragement. The blessing that this actually is, that people can work in a company that will be here, that has a future, that, husbands and wives and kids can work here at some point. The producers can bring their children into the business at some point and turn over their business to them. All of it without having to sell. It's just, it's so impactful that if we can articulate it well enough and prove it, then I think that people will say, wow, it really is different here. This is the way God intended business to run, because we got to make money. You can't help people unless you have money. You can't do pro bono work if you don't have money. So money is absolutely critical, but it's not the only thing we're working for. We're working to have people that we consider like a family, the good part of the family, the supportive side.
Well, I think that's a wonderful place for us to wrap today's discussion, and obviously, we'll continue to build on these themes, as we have more shows moving forward. But I just want to thank you all for the wonderful conversation around today's topic on the Crucible of Leadership. So at this point, we like to do our recommendations. So, for the uninitiated who might be listening in for the first time, this is usually where we recommend some professional development resources that we've recently read or consumed. So it doesn't have to just be something written on the page. It could be some form of media, in hopes that you all will benefit from it as well. And usually one of our most expansive recommendations come from Mr. Leif Hurst, which runs the gamut from books to media, all sorts of fun stuff. So, Leif, what do you have for us today?
I've got a boring one to start with. Not a boring one, but something that I just recommend that everybody read. I'm reading through it because, as many of you know, Garrett and I are venturing out into our own thing, along with Mike and a close friend of ours, Tony, and starting Ansel. And so there's a book called The E-Myth, and then there's another one called E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And it just kind of gets to this whole point of, and I think I actually even recommended E-Myth before, but the revisited one is what I'm going through now. And actually would challenge our own Charlie here to give it and really what it is just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to have a business doing it. And it's just a sobering look. And it's not a thing to talk you out of going into entrepreneurship. It's just to get your eyes open about it. Because I use this example, but I've got a Cindy Clark as a dear friend of mine. In fact, her son was one of my baseball kids. But she's an amazing chef and opened up a restaurant and is now finding out that she doesn't really get to be a chef much because she's so busy now, with marketing and legal and accounting and all the things that come with running a business.
Crucible of leadership.
The crucible of leadership. The other one is, and you'll have to, excuse me if I've got a little cough there, but getting over an illness from last week, but have really enjoyed listening to a podcast. It's a short podcast, actually comes out twice a day, called The President's Daily Brief. It's actually by an ex-CIA guy, Mike Baker. And he just in like 15 minutes is just like, it's what they used to do to prepare the president about what was all going on in the world. And it's like 12 to 15 minutes of like world events. And it's just straight and skinny and no opinion or anything on top of it. And so with everything going on in the world with, whether it's AI or, the what's going on in the Middle East or troubles with China or Russia, that's about the bandwidth that I have to worry about things that are not right in front of me. And so it's just a real quick thing. And there's a morning edition and an afternoon edition. So
The facts, nothing but the facts.
No, that's great. Well, I think you and I are not that I'm surprised, but our mindsets are on a similar wavelength. I've been revisiting the Agile Manifesto, which sort of created this whole project management philosophy, or I guess sort of philosophy on how to build technology as we're getting Ansel off the ground. And so, my recommendation this week is the Agile Manifesto, and specifically, I've been delving into, there's 12 principles that underline sort of the Agile approach, and then 4 values. And, I just think there's so much wisdom packed in this. And I think I've talked about this before, but really where a lot of this came out of is one gentleman who graduated from West Point, right? Jeff Sutherland. He started doing this at West Point, I guess 50 some years ago, and then sort of continued to refine it. And then of course added in other project management people. And eventually they sort of put this whole thing together, and really was sort of born out of their frustrations of seeing technologies fail. So my recommendation this week is the Agile Manifesto.
perfect.
Nice. I will have to look at both of those recommendations. Actually, everything that y'all just talked about interests me a lot.
Perfect. Mr. Charlie, what about you?
So mine, it's a TV show. It's on Netflix. It's called The Midnight Gospel.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, I actually don't even know if any of you guys would like it, but it's an adult animated series. And it basically takes the audio from a podcast by this guy, Duncan Trussell, and the people he interviews, and they just animate it with a little story over it. So the episodes are just about life and death and everything in between. You'll have one episode talking about, accepting death, and another one that talks about the legalization of drugs. So very interesting. You get to see a lot of different perspectives watching that show.
Yeah, Duncan Trussell is a 70s hippie comedian that was born about 30 years too late. So he is a interesting guy, though.
Yeah.
Rhonda, what about you?
Yeah, I have a couple actually. I'm not saying this because I'm wearing a CoVerica shirt or talking with Mike, but I would say these podcasts that you guys have been doing for the last 9 weeks or 8 weeks or so, I have really enjoyed them, and I kind of relate it to my husband's father knew he was dealing with cancer and he was facing mortality. So he took the time over, I think, a couple of years to make tapes for my husband and his sister, just about stories of his life. And there's one in particular where he was on a pickup baseball team when he was in junior high, and he wasn't good enough. And you can hear in his voice in the tape the anger that he's going back, 40 years, 50 years ago from that one event. But I've kind of likened it to listening to Mike through these podcasts, and it's really like he's leaving us a legacy of what he's built here at CoVerica. And so I would really encourage, and I do encourage the employees, and I know they are listening, but it's just really, I'm learning things about Mike and Heidi and from Mike, just listening, and we talk almost every day. So I'm giving you guys a plug because I think it's a legacy, and I think it's something that will be a gift that will be given to Samantha and Chris and Mike and all of us that can benefit from it. The other one is my favorite little have by my side book. It's called The Servant Leader, and Paul Kiesling with Center Consulting and Mike may have introduced this to me, but it's all about leadership starts with the heart and the head and the hands and your habits. And so you can tell it's earmarked. I've been writing and highlighting in it. But I think
I saw 3 different colors of highlighter in there.
You probably did. Every time I go through it, I pick up on something else. But it's some of it is scriptural based. Obviously, the original servant leader and it was Jesus, and just being able to learn lessons through history. And so for younger people who are considering leadership, it's a good starting place of being a servant first. Whoever you consider that you're serving, but serving others is just really important to the development and the growth.
Perfect. That's great.
Well, thank you, Rhonda. That's very kind of you to say that. I would throw in Rhonda at the C12 that she's going to brought a book for me to read, which is The Board of Directors for Private Enterprise by Dennis Kagan. And it's really very, very good because we have to set up a board of directors for both CoVerica and also for the foundation / 501c3. And Garrett was very kind to introduce us to some really smart people that are helping us figure out how to execute it with a level of excellence. So the book is talking about the structure of doing it, and it really is helpful. So one of the things that I'm doing now is it says, go through your contacts and to create the board, and you want to have so many people from the company, like a couple of people that are from the company. You want to have obviously Rhonda would be reporting to the board because she is the interim CEO till we ultimately find my replacement. Then you have other people that are experts of different ilk, like some of our key clients, lawyers, professionals, so that you have people that will, I don't want to say get in the face, but basically say, here's what they're looking for, here's what they need, and so that they can be a real positive to building the board. We are ready to go with a company that's going to help us set up the foundation and all of that. So I want to get that put to bed before I jump into the next major project with everything else I've got working. So anyway, the board of directors for a private enterprise is very helpful. And then something else. It's a book that I read, and then somebody told me about the movie. So we watched the movie, and it reminded me how amazing Ben Carson is. And it's called Gifted Hands. It's on Netflix, and Cuba Gooding played played Ben Carson. And I had read the book first. And so, of course, when you watch the movie, you see the liberties that Hollywood takes and all this other stuff, but it did not get across. You talk about somebody that has been through hardships to, what Charlie, what you were asking about, taking on a leadership position, or when Garrett, when you were saying, how do you deal with these things? I mean, if you read that book or even watch the movie, here is a young Black male back when there was so much discrimination, and he was extremely smart, and his mother, the kind of mother we all wish we had. The poor woman couldn't even read, but she never let her kids know she couldn't read. So when they would say, "Mom, help me with my homework," she says, "No, you need to figure it out. No, you need to do it." They didn't know she couldn't read. And so they figured it out. And so she ends up cleaning, in the movie, she ends up cleaning a house. She takes these jobs. Her husband, turns out he had another family, and he leaves her destitute to raise these two boys. Very difficult. So she's doing cleaning jobs, which is the only kind of work she could get. And so she's working for this, I think he was a professor, and looked at all these books, and she says, "You read all these?" He says, "Yeah, pretty much." And so she realized the importance of an education, and she was unrelenting to Ben and his brother. And so fast forward, it starts out as a story where it being discriminated against and the hardships that was peculiar to the Blacks. But Ben Carson wanted more for his life, and he realized that he was intelligent and he could remember things. And then he just got the bug. He wanted to be a doctor. He became a brain surgeon, and he was the first surgeon in the world that separated Siamese twins that were connected in the head. And usually one would die and the other one would live, or both of them would die. And he did it. I mean, it's an amazing story. And I knew none of this until he ran for president. But there are people like that. So either watch the movie or read the book for sure, because it was very good. And then just for fun, I'm reading a book. It's called Rules of Prey by John Sanford. This is the mind candy, where it's a murder mystery thing. And there's a guy, Mad Dog. And the reason why I got it, because some of these, it's just brain candy. And this particular guy has written, I think, 38 books, the Prey books. So I read one book that Heidi got me at a garage sale or a consignment store or somewhere. And I read it, and it was pretty good. So I found out there's 38 of them. So I went all the way back to the first one that I found. I've bought it somewhere online because it's a used book. But it's fun because you get into this. It's so ridiculous, but it's fun. So that's from me.
Very cool. Well, we appreciate the recommendations, and we just want to thank Rhonda for coming in and sharing, everything that you've gone through and learned in your journey with us.
And thank you for having me.
I appreciate you giving a shout out.
Putting up with me.
Like I said, the pot gets hot sometimes.
There you go. I know. So, and I like your, it's funny about the recommendation to the podcast. I caught the podcast in my son's iPhone.
Oh.
And he goes, "Dad, it's cool to hear you talk like this." And I thought that was neat. And so we're leaving something that we're just going to outlive all of us. Yeah. So with that said, we just want to thanks for listening to today's episode of What It Takes to Lead. New episodes drop every other Thursday. Please give us a line if you've got a question or a suggestion on the podcast. And you can always reach us at podcast@coverica.com or via X, formerly known as Twitter, at WITTLPOD. And finally, if you like the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, thanks so much.